What is metabolic testing and should you get it done to help your running? That is what we're talking about today. Welcome to episode 149 on the Healthy Runner podcast, where we help you get stronger, run faster, and enjoy lifelong injury-free running. Today, I am joined by a PT colleague of mine. Dr. Cameron Garber is a physical therapist, owner of Body Smart in South Ogden, Utah, and host of the Running Unbroken podcast. Cameron is passionate about helping people run pain-free, feel young, and live life so they can say yes to everything they want to do. He is a doctor of physical therapy who got tired of the sick care system and set out to change it. So what he found was that easy running and steady strength training are the time-tested strategies for long-term health and being able to do all the things you love to do. So he helps people run, even if they don't think of themselves as runners. He uses specially designed metabolic testing to see exactly what someone needs to do for their body to maximize their results from every workout. At Body Smart, Cameron and his team really focus on helping people live and feel strongly about 5 healthy life patterns: activity, eating, sleep, stress, and happiness. If people can get their patterns right in those areas, they can see success. So
Perfect.
obviously, everything that I just mentioned, we are huge believers here on the Healthy Runner podcast. So I am very, very excited to get to chat with you today, Cameron. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that was perfect. That's a great way of saying it. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I follow you closely because you're doing so many of the things that I'm just like, oh, that's he's doing it so well. So, I'm excited to get a chat with you again today.
Awesome. And guys, in this episode, Cameron's really going to share his knowledge and expertise really as it relates to metabolic testing for runners. So we're going to cover, like, what does metabolic testing tell you? Why is a metabolic test important? Should you get a metabolic test? How is a metabolic test done? And what is the difference between a metabolic test and a VO2 max and threshold testing? And then how
Yeah.
much does metabolic testing cost? These are honestly all questions that I want to know the answers to myself, because I really don't know a lot about this topic at all. So, yeah, I am excited to get into this. So, Cameron, on the show, we always start with a little dynamic warm up, just like we would before our run. So, if you can tell the
Nice.
listeners, where you call home and give us a little bit of backstory on really how you've gotten to this point in your, career and running journey.
Yeah. Well, so career-wise, I started actually at the University of Utah Hospital. I was the stroke team lead and was tasked with building a wellness program as part of that. So like we built the stroke team and really our outpatient neuro from I was the only outpatient neurotherapist in our location, and then we had like 2 more up at another location. We combined and we went from the 3 of us to like 9 of us and grew this, and it was awesome. And I, as part of that, was building this wellness program, and I thought, well, heck, we are on the wrong end of wellness. Like they've already had a stroke at this point. Why don't we like have a wellness program where we prevent the stroke in the first place? And I had a mentor through school, Julie Knighton, whose practice I eventually bought, and that's what this is. It was turned it into Body Smart. But she taught me how to do this metabolic testing. And I'd kind of worked on the side with her on some projects of promoting the metabolic testing because I thought it was such a cool thing and so eye opening for me. And so I went to the university and I said, hey, I'm going to buy this equipment. I'm going to invest like 20,000 of my own dollars. And I'd like to invest my time as well, my days off on Thursdays and Saturday mornings, and create this, like stroke prevention wellness program with the hospital. I got on an interdisciplinary board with, bariatrics and family medicine and, all these other departments, dietetics and eventually the word was no. Like, we don't have time. We don't have the resources to put behind it. It's like, we just bought like 10 different $100,000 pieces of equipment. Like, what do you mean we don't have time or resources? And I was donating the time and resources. So anyway, just large institutions, I realized like I'm an idea guy and I want to change things, and this maybe isn't the right setting. So I still bought the equipment and just kind of went out on my own. And long story short, eventually I wound up buying my own practice. So Julie Knight and physical therapy that we turned into Body Smart, where I could kind of fulfill that dream of pursuing it the way I wanted to and helping people lead that fit, healthy, active lifestyle and prevent all of those things. But change the focus of it from being on weight on the scale, or even get healthier, to like enjoy my life more, do the things that I love to do, be the person I want to be for as long as I can be that, right? We are definitely not, 30-day challenge, emphasis type programs. We are like, let's help you build a 30-year plan that you so you can do this till you're 85, right? Like that's kind of our mentality. And I guess metabolic testing fits in that it helps you to know what to do for your body. So actually, I was pretty skeptical of it at first when I was first introduced to it. So I did it in school, like the VO2 max test that you have to do as part of school and everything. I was one of the test dummies and just about killed myself because one of my classmates was a collegiate runner, and was still like winning local 5Ks, 10Ks, things like that pretty fast. But we were about the same height and build and whatever. So I hopped on the treadmill right after him, and he got like a 62 or 63. I was like, well, I can do that. If he got it, I can. And I did. The difference was, and this is why VO2 max, and we'll talk about that later, why VO2 max doesn't really matter. I got the same VO2 max score as he did. He got off the treadmill and was like, whew, that was tough. I got off and was white as a ghost. They had to check my blood sugar and give me food. I laid down for like 45 minutes. Like it almost killed me, and he was fine. Right. So we got the same number, but like in a race, he would have smoked me, no problem. And so
Oh
that was the difference. Right.
oh my goodness, yeah. That could, I'm sure it was probably not a very fun day for you.
No.
And yeah, we're definitely going to get into all of that because I'm really interested to hear the differences between those two.
Yeah.
But I love how your story, did start from really this kind of pain point of having, these larger institutions. And I always love this, right? Like you work in a large institution and they're like, oh, we got more money in the budget. Like what, capital purchases can we do for the years over? How expensive of a piece of equipment can we
Right.
do to like treat someone after the fact versus like you mentioned, hey, we have all this money here. You know what? Why don't we actually start that prevention
Right.
program we've been talking about or thinking about versus spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in some of these pieces of equipment that are, like you said, kind of feeding into the sick care model and just
Yeah.
working on treatment versus preventing things. So I love that you started your practice out of that eye of how can I prevent some of these injuries and how can we promote the well-being of our society so we can do the things that we love until we're 85.
Right.
Whereas I like to say, running until I'm in the box. And
Totally.
so
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So as far as running is concerned, do you run yourself?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So I'm what I consider an adult onset runner. So I
Yes.
actually hated running because I grew up in kind of the traditional team sports model, right? So baseball, basketball, football, soccer, loved all those sports, but running for those is a punishment, right? You screw up, you go run laps. Like it was always used as some kind of punishment versus let's give you that edge to beat your competitors. Let's have you be the fittest one on the court. The mentality behind it was like, oh, you screwed up, go run laps. So I hated running. I could run. I was actually a really good runner during baseball tryouts. The coach said, hey, like you can really improve your station by how hard you work here. So I made it a point to lap every single person at least twice, and most of them I lapped 3 times. So we had to just in a half hour we had to run around the outside perimeter of the baseball field. So I lapped everybody at least twice. So like I could run. I was actually pretty good, and I also ran a 4:39:40 that day too. So like I was fast and like could at least will myself. I could suffer enough to beat other people. But but without really running much. And I honestly hated it. And then my wife, who's a really good marathoner, has never not qualified for Boston
Wow.
and has run lots of marathons. Actually, is the only marathon that she didn't qualify for Boston, was running Boston, because she got really sick right before. It was really sad. So she ran it like pumped full of drugs. And
Oh my goodness. Was that the only time she did run Boston,
no,
or
she's
was
run it
she?
again
Oh,
since.
good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I went on a run with her, and we ran up in the mountains on vacation one time, and I ran 8 miles with her, and she's like, "How is that even possible? That's not even fair that you can run 8 miles totally, like you never run and you can just come and run 8 miles." I was like, "Well, yeah, if you run this slow." And she stopped and was like, "What do you think distance running is? You're not running as fast as you can all the time." I was like, "Oh, really?" Like that, I guess it just never occurred to me. To me, fitness and exercise and running had to be like all out. You go as hard as you can and leave it all out there type of a thing, because that's what team sports teaches you, right? It doesn't
Yep.
teach you like go enjoy the workout. It's like, no, work as hard as you can so you can like kill everybody else. And so that was kind of this mentality I had. So that event kind of lined up with when I came to see Julie Knighton for my clinical rotation, and she preached this 70-30. So it wasn't quite the 80-20 that's kind of in the research now. She preached more of a 70-30 plan of 70% of the time just slow, steady, easy, and 30% of the time higher intensity. And I was like, that doesn't track. That's not what my coaches always told me. And
Right.
so I did my first metabolic test, and she showed me how I burned fat versus carbohydrate and where my zones really should be and whatever. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. I had been through grad school and had put on some weight. I wasn't really overweight, just put on weight for me. I mean, I graduated high school at like a buck 20, so I was a pretty skinny dude just naturally, but had gotten up to about 165. And in the last 8 weeks of that 10-week internship, I dropped 20 pounds just by like running slow. It was great. Now, the caveat there is I was a 26, 27-year-old male. So like the fat burning machine is pretty high at 26, 27. But that was like, oh my gosh, I changed my health and my fitness level dramatically with very few high intensity efforts, and mostly just walking. And then I switched up my lunches. Instead of going to Little Caesars and buying a pizza and eating 3,500 calories, I started going and buying massive salads or like whole, like spaghetti squash or other things like that. And so I'd eat a huge volume of food, but it was all just like something natural. And just for lunch, the rest of my diet stayed the same. And I dropped 20 pounds in like that 8 weeks. Results not typical,
Right.
but but it was crazy to me that just switching up the way I exercised made all the difference. And I wasn't hungry, I wasn't fatigued, I wasn't tired. I could work out every single day. Whereas before, if I had run at all, I'd have to take days off in between because I went as hard as I could. So I was like, okay, so there's something to this metabolic testing. And one of the biggest keys was finding those accurate heart rate zones that you
Okay.
could learn where for your body at that point in time. And so it changes over time and you need to retest and whatnot. But you can
Hmm.
find out exactly where those heart rate zones are. And so if you've ever tried heart rate training before, so it gets kind of a bad rap because people have tried it and it's like, oh, it didn't work for me. I got slower, or I still felt like I was working out too hard or whatever. The problem is that the numbers are bad. That the ways of getting your heart rate zones are typically not great. And so the metabolic testing gives you this objective way that is based on your body versus just averages, estimates, calculators to get those heart rate zones, which the ACSM did one study, and most of the calculators are between like 15 and 33% off. So when you're talking heart rate zones, like 10 beats per minute, you can go from burning 60% fat to 40% fat in just a 10 beats per minute swing. And so that can be really pretty huge in terms of the fatigue related to that and things like that. So getting those zones dialed in accurately according to your body is really, really important.
Okay. So I definitely want to learn more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you had to, kind of say like, what does the actual metabolic, or how about this? Let's set the table here because
Yeah.
there's probably some that have no clue,
What this, yeah.
how a metabolic test is done. Maybe
Yeah.
describe to us how a metabolic test is done, and then we could talk about like what it tells us.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So metabolic test is eh, if you have to do an emissions test for your car, right? So they stick a probe in your tailpipe of your car and they measure the combustion of what your engine just did. So it can measure how much, soot is still in the air, how much oxygen, carbon dioxide, whatever, how clean it burned, right?
Hmm.
We can do the same thing with the human body. Luckily, we don't deal with tailpipes. We put a mask on your face and have you breathe out. And what you breathe out tells us how you burned calories. So the amount of oxygen that you consumed, so that's that VO2 number, is the amount of oxygen you consume versus the amount of carbon dioxide you produce in consuming those calories. So, carbohydrates have that carbon backbone. So there's more carbons per, molecule than a fat calorie, right? Or a fat cell or a fat molecule. And so as you break that down, there's more byproduct of carbon dioxide. Whereas a fat molecule really burns very efficiently. And so you produce this carbon dioxide. That's actually what makes us breathe heavier, our heart beat harder, things like that. As we're exercising, is carbon dioxide starts to build up in your blood. It makes your blood acidic. And so to bring the pH of your blood back up, these chemoreceptors in your neck here, as you start running, trigger and say, oh, I need the heart to beat harder. I need you to start breathing heavier so we can blow off all of this excess carbon dioxide. It's really not about getting more oxygen in, especially at the first part of exercise. It's more about blowing carbon dioxide off. And then at high intensity, that's what it's all about, is getting rid of carbon dioxide to try to buffer your blood. So
Mm.
that's a really nerdy explanation. So what we can do though is take that ratio of the carbon dioxide you're producing and the oxygen that you're consuming, and we look at that, and there's what's called the respiratory quotient or the respiratory exchange ratio. And that number tells us how much fat versus how much carbon dioxide or carbohydrate that you're burning. So we can look at any given heart rate range how much fat and carbon dioxide you're burning, or carbohydrate you're burning. And what that tells us is how efficiently you're running. So the average human, so let's take somebody that's kind of average healthy person, 150 pounds, 20% body fat. So relatively, thin, healthy person. That person has 105,000 calories of fat stored on their body at 20% body fat. So this massive reservoir of unending energy, 105,000 calories. That same person is probably packing somewhere between 16 to 1800 calories worth of carbs on their body. So a relatively small reservoir in comparison, especially for longer efforts like the marathon, right? And so when we wonder why we bonk during a marathon, it's because we typically go at an intensity level where we're burning predominantly carbohydrate. And so if you've got 16 to 1800 calories worth of carbs spread throughout your body, you're storing about 6 to 800 of that in your liver. You've got a little bit in your bloodstream, and then the rest is distributed throughout your muscles. But I can't take, glycogen from my bicep and bring it down to my quads or my calves to keep running. And so fat you can mobilize from your earlobe to your quad if you need to, but glycogen, once it's stored in the muscle, that's where it's going to be used. So in your running muscles, you only have a few hundred calories worth of carbs. So you wonder why around that like 16 to 18 mile marker, you bonk pretty hard during a marathon. Part of that is you're running out of carbohydrate and you're running mostly on carbohydrate on race day. And so the liver still has some in reserve, but a lot of taking that goo packet or the Gatorade or whatever that is, taking some kind of supplement, what that does usually is actually, because we're running so hard, our digestion slows. So we get some of that sugar in, but really not all that terribly much. In fact, a lot of those things dehydrate you more than they hydrate or fuel you. But they do trigger your brain to say, okay, liver, we've got more coming. We're going to be okay. You can release that glycogen in the liver. And so it kind of gives us that second wind, that boost, things like that. So, and then eventually that sugar does start releasing from your gut. But because digestion is slowed, sometimes, it really depends on the intensity and the length of your effort and marathon and whatever. But
Right.
anyway, so that's part of the reason why you just can't go as intense for an ultra marathon, for example, just because the brain starts to slow you down at those higher intensities if you're burning that much carbohydrate, because it regulates that and says, I can't keep going that long at this intensity. And
Okay.
so by training your body to burn fat and be able to get higher into your heart rate range, so higher intensities of effort, but still burning fat, that's where we unlock your ability to go harder, faster, and train better. So when we test elite athletes, which I've tested some amazing athletes, it's really fun. The one of the most fun was the 2019 50K U.S. champion. He was a long-term patient of ours, and he, when we test him, he'd be like 175 beats per minute and still burning like 50% fat or better, which is incredible. So he could go so high into his heart rate range and still be very, very effective at burning fat, so that his fatigue level was less, right? Like he wasn't going to burn out quite as early because he wasn't tapping into those carbohydrate reserves at the same rate that many of the rest of us are.
Okay. So hold on one second here,
Yeah, yeah.
Cameron,
That
because you
I just
just
said a
like
whole lot.
brain dumped.
Hmm.
Honestly, probably 80% of the information even went over my head because it
Sure,
was very technical and
it
sciencey.
was.
So I
Yeah,
want to make
totally,
sure that I'm understanding you correctly so our
totally.
listeners can understand you as well. So first off, how we do this metabolic test is we have like a mask,
Yep,
right? That's connected to a tube that's connected to a machine.
yep.
And that can be at rest or while running when this is taken.
Yeah, so we do both a resting test and an exercise test. Yeah. So the
Okay.
resting test tells us if you were to just sit in a chair all day long, how many calories would you burn just hanging out in the chair? So that gives us a really good baseline of you shouldn't eat fewer calories than that. Otherwise, you're going to slow your metabolism down. And so a lot of people that are trying to lose weight sabotage themselves by eating too few calories. And so we can measure that and see where should you be in terms of like baseline calories, and then we can add back in for your
Okay.
exercise.
That's a huge point there because I know that is very common in a lot of our runners and our healthy
Totally.
runner dietitian, Brooke. We're very
Yeah.
happy to hear this
Yes.
that because we do see underfueling and a lot of people go into running with maybe the goal initially of weight loss
Yeah.
and they're not taking in enough calories. So a metabolic test, a resting metabolic test would give you the actual it would determine how many calories that you're burning while resting. So you know that you're not taking in less than that because then you would be underfueling
Right.
for your actual runs.
Right. And that would be the absolute basement number of calories to burn. Like you should not ever eat less than that. Otherwise, you're going
Okay.
to slow your metabolism down. But if you're actively training for something, you don't want to even eat that. You need to eat even more than that. You want to at least replace the carbohydrate portion from your exercise so that you have enough building blocks to repair and rebuild. Most running injuries are a combination, obviously, of overloading, but also of underfueling, right? So that
Yep.
combination is super dangerous, right? If you don't give yourself the building blocks and you're overloading beyond a point that you can recover. We always say that the only workout that matters is the one that you can recover from. And
Okay.
so if you're not fully recovered, you're doing more harm than good.
That makes sense. Thank you very much for that clarification. And
Yeah.
then what is the difference between the running metabolic test. Why would you do that? And do you always recommend both? Like if you have a runner, would you take a resting and you would do a running metabolic test?
Yeah, I almost always do.
Okay.
Occasionally people will be like, "No, I'm good. Like I can eat whatever," and that can be true for some younger and especially male runners. And so sometimes we don't, but I still kind of make the case that yeah, but injuries are still really prevalent. Bone stress injuries are really prevalent. So like you need to make sure you're eating enough. So it's a good idea to get that baseline. The difference there then with the running test, and really you can test on any piece of equipment, so you elliptical bike, whatever, but those heart rate results are only going to be applicable to that activity. So that's, if you're a runner, we even switch up the protocol of how you test. And that kind of goes to some of those other points. But like we don't do your grandma's VO2 max test, right? So we don't even call it VO2 max test because we do a metabolic test. We're looking specifically at your metabolism versus that VO2 max number because we want to see how you're using calories. And so we try to match. If you're a trail runner, we're going to use elevation more than speed. If you're an elite trail runner, we'll do a combination of speed and elevation in the testing protocol. If you're just starting out, if you're a couch to 5K person, we're going to go speed up to a certain point, but probably not get you beyond just a light jog, and then use elevation to a certain point. And usually that's enough to kind of max people out. And so we really try to match the protocol that we're using to the type of running you want to do. And so sometimes people will come in and they have been a road runner forever and things like that. And now they want to start trail. So they'll come in to do a test just to see like how the elevation affects their heart rate zones and things like that. And
Okay.
so, yeah, the exercise test then allows us to see at each kind of stage along the way. So when we do it, I want to see your heart rate climb very linearly so that we can see each stage along the way. What is your heart rate doing and what is your metabolism doing? So that those two things are actually quite linked together. So when we retest within a certain time window, so you can progress and bump those numbers up. But when we retest, the number of calories you burn and the mix of fat to carbohydrate tends to stick with the certain heart rates pretty closely from test to test. So if we retested somebody like 3 times in the week, it would be pretty accurate to about the same number of that RER or that fat burn percentage number.
Okay. And you had mentioned about stored glycogen in our muscles,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
only so much of that that we can use.
Right.
So, is it best for runners to hold on to that stored glycogen as long as possible during, let's say, they're doing a
Right.
marathon or a half marathon? So, you do actually want them to be burning fat more efficiently? Is that the
Yep.
goal? To
Yeah. If you
improve performance?
Yeah, so that's where the most elite runners in the world can get to, is where that high intensity they're sipping on the glycogen from their muscles while they're guzzling the fat, if that makes sense, right? Like
Yeah.
as far as the fuel mix ratio, they're really, I think of it kind of like a hybrid car. When you're going hard, you're running off the gasoline engine, and the electric engine's just kind of helping push you along a little bit, right?
Mhm.
And so, but at slower speeds and intensities, well, I guess that doesn't really work because at slow speeds and intensities, you run off the hybrid engine. But anyway, but that's, you'd like to be able to get to that, I guess, where the fat is running the show for as long as possible. Where for most of us, that's not the case. And so I always talk about, there's all kinds of different zone systems. The simplest way I try to break it down for people is there are really three main zones in my kind of opinion. Is we've got the comfortable zone, where essentially I could run this way forever. Like not just 30 minutes to an hour and a half. I'm talking like 4 or 5 hours. I could run in this comfortable zone for virtually ever.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our comfortably uncomfortable zone, which is where most of us train. This zone of like, yeah, I can do this for about 30 to 90 minutes, but I'm going to be tired afterward. I'll be kind of hungry. Yeah, I can do it fine. I can do it day after day, but I'm kind of a little beat up from it. Not too bad. And I like the way it makes me feel and everything. It's good for your health and whatnot. And then there's the uncomfortably uncomfortable zone. And that's like track workouts or speed workouts. It's pushing hard. It's that anaerobic or threshold type style runs where you're pushing pretty hard, right? And so really the comfortably uncomfortable zone is where most of us tend to spend our time, and yet is the least effective zone of the three.
Right. So this is like the gray zone that people talk about, right?
Yeah, so that the no man's land or there's
Yeah.
all kinds of the junk miles or whatever.
Yeah.
It's where most of us tend to spend our time, and yet it's the least effective in terms of progress. So it's not that we shouldn't do it per se. Like it's so good for your heart and your lungs and your overall health. It's fine. It's just a zone where you're depleting carbohydrate because you're burning mostly carbohydrate there. So most people are between 40 to about 10% fat burn in that zone. And so they're burning predominantly carbohydrate, which is that fatigable resource more, right? You can run out of that. And if you don't have that, then it's harder to rebuild tendon, ligament, bone, all those things. And so those repair and recovery gets put on the back burner, especially when we run day in, day out. And so that's why that carbohydrate, why that fuel mix is so important. Not only do we run out during our workout or during our race or whatever, can we kind of run low on that, but it also makes it harder to recover and repair because we just have this bigger gap of carbohydrate that we have to repair and replenish. And it's going to put that back into the liver and back into the glycogen stores first as we eat carbohydrate. It's going to repair or it's going to replenish those stores first because that's fight or flight response. That's maintaining our blood sugar. Those are like kind of higher level needs before repairing your tendon or repairing your, plantar fascia or whatever that is. And so by getting that fuel mix right, it gives us more of a chance to recover and spend more time under load, more time training if we can burn more fat so that it's less like hard on our body. We're depleting ourselves less. And it's a really good indicator that we've built up our capacity to be able to handle the load that we're placing on it with our running. So that's one of the reasons why we love heart rate is heart rate doesn't lie. Heart rate tells us if we're fatigued, if we're lacking sleep, if we're stressed out, if we're dehydrated, if it's a hot day, all those things, heart rate doesn't lie. It's a really good indicator of where we're at internally. So it's very objective. And so pace, like you can have a day where it's like, man, for whatever reason, I feel super fast today. Or the next day it's, man, I was able to do that pace 2 days ago and today I just can't even hold it. But what you don't realize is that you didn't sleep very well because you were stressed about your kid's math test that he failed. And that puts more load on your overall system and makes you burn fat less effectively because the whole system is more fatigued. And so if you go out and try to stick to a certain pace, you're actually kind of digging your hole deeper in terms of recovery and your risk of injury climbs. So this is why we love heart rate training and why dialing in your heart rate to the fat burn really like connects your body to like what's going to be best for you on any given day.
Okay, so
Hopefully that
this
made sense. I know
is
this is like
no,
drinking from the
this
fire
is
hose.
it is no, this is great though because you are making connections in my brain and hopefully in our listeners' brain on
Yeah.
previous trainings we've done, and then we had a deep dive episode on like the MAF method and heart
Yeah.
rate training. So I think you're really providing some really good context into kind
Yeah.
of more support. And I like how you framed it of, not so much that it needs to stay in this zone, but the why, right? Like,
Hmm.
why is, metabolic testing important is to find these zones that are
Right.
specific to you. So you stay, within your three main zones. From what I heard from you, is that
Yeah.
comfortable zone is our easy runs. That's where we should be the majority of the time, like 80, right? If you're
Yeah.
using the 80-20 rule, you should be in that comfortable zone.
Right.
And the most common mistake, especially novice runners make, is going too fast and worrying
Right.
about what it says on their watch and not
Right.
wanting to do a 11-minute mile and a 12-minute mile. I just
Right.
literally had one of my clients, we had this conversation, and I was
Yeah.
looking at her easy runs. I said, you are running these too fast, right? And
Right.
I was like, I want you to challenge yourself to try and run an 11-minute pace for this first double digit long run that you are going to do in a couple years, right? It's
Right.
been a couple years since she's done that. And I said, I want you to challenge to actually do that. Like, that is your mark. Success is not built upon
Right.
whether you can run a 9-minute, pace for your long run on, Saturday. It is because of what you're talking about here.
Right.
And I love how you kind of tied it into the strain on our bodies and stress and sleep and all that impacts. And it's going to throw whatever pace you're looking at on your watch, not be the most reliable variable for you to be tracking while you're out there.
Right.
And we talk about going on feel all the time and effort and using like RPE, but I think really what I'm hearing here is that this metabolic test is going to give you a specific number in terms
Yeah.
of really dialing down those specific heart rate zones for your particular body and how efficient you are at metabolizing food, right?
Right.
And I guess probably impacts based upon your training level, right? And
Hmm.
how fit you are.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. And so the besides training zones, is there anything else that the metabolic testing kind of gives you or that's important to know? Or no, is that the main kind of take home?
Well, so I would say that's the main take home as far as like what someone can learn. For me, it's really fascinating because I can look at somebody's test and tell them exactly how they train. Like, so I've done well over 3,000 tests, and so I can look at it and be like, oh, you tend to train, you're a heavy zone 3 trainer, right? So like you push in that comfortably uncomfortable zone all the time. So you can even, like, when you do your speed workouts and whatever, like, you're good at suffering, but you don't know how to run slow. You're really inefficient at running slow. And so you actually have this tiny little zone too. So when I prescribe it, I usually do the 5 zone method because that's just what people are used to. That's what their watch uses, things like that. But so zone 2 is kind of where you want to spend the bulk of your time, right? And then zone 4 and 5 is the rest of your time. And I can tell, like, how you're trained. Like, do you spend most of your time in zone 3, or occasionally you'll find somebody that is like just naturally a zone 2 trainer, but then they don't spend any time in zones 4 and 5, and so they wind up not being able to suffer very well. They have still a huge zone 3 and then these tiny zone 4 and 5, because as soon as they hit anything higher intensity, it just drops off right away. They can't handle that. And so you can see, like, those different people. I've had a few that are strictly zone 4 or 5 people. Like, that's all they do. And so
Right.
they redline like right away, but then they can sustain that for like a ridiculously long amount of time. But they're super uncomfortable. It's just interesting to see, like, you can tell how somebody's training. So it lets you know, like, is your overall training like working for what your goal is? That's one of the biggest things we ask people is, like, is what you're doing matching what your goals are? And I would argue that a lot of people, their fitness effort doesn't really match their fitness goal. And so that can always be frustrating for people because, I think most of us work out to burn fat, right? Like, we want to look good, feel good, and that's maybe not the primary goal, but that's definitely part of it. We talk a lot about like race training is not a good time actually to lose weight, because you should be fueling yourself enough that you're staying healthy, that you're building up, because you're trying to build yourself up. And so like being able to use that metabolic information to dial in what they're doing with what they're trying to accomplish. I think that's the biggest take home. And using that heart rate data is just a vehicle for doing that.
Okay, I love it. How long does the test actually take, and where can someone get this done?
So there are testing locations all over the country. I would say you get what you pay for. It usually takes, so for me, our appointments at least take an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. So we really we do a long warm up. Uh, I'm very meticulous about kind of the protocol of how they come in fasting for the resting test and all these other things to make sure we remove as many variables as we can so that it's really like quality lab test. So that's the idea with the lab testing versus field testing or things like that. So when you test, look for big tubes hooking into the mask, not small tubes. And the backpack style and stuff like that, they're just not quite as accurate at low flow. So like your resting test and high flow at that high end of intensity. They're okay in the middle, but I would still argue like go with the more accurate systems. So look for big tubes. And then you get what you pay for. So like a lot of colleges and universities will offer VO2 max testing,
Hmm.
but I would argue a VO2 max test isn't really what you're looking for anyway. That max number doesn't matter as much as the information in between. Because you kind of know like what hard feels like. And so, that's really how we should be training anyway, is either low and slow or really high, right? And avoid that zone 3 stuff, because it just doesn't help us progress. And so a test where we're just kind of testing the high end doesn't really give us as much info as one where we kind of see where those borders of that kind of low fat burn, moderate intensities are. And so like that's something, if somebody wanted to reach out and say, hey, will you share the protocol with me that you would use for where you're at, I'd be happy to share the protocols with whoever you're going to get tested from. One of the easiest ways to find somewhere near you is
Hmm.
to go to the manufacturer of the equipment that I use. So core.com, KORR.com. Go to their website and they have a facility finder. And so you can find a location near you that does the testing. Try to find one that has both a VO2 and VCO2 cart. So it'll test not just oxygen, but oxygen and carbon dioxide, so that you can have that. With just the oxygen, you can't get your fat burn metabolism numbers. And so, yeah, you want to go there, find their facility finder and find somewhere near you. Like I said, if you want to reach out, definitely do. There's a few questions that I would definitely ask, like how do they do their protocol? How do they interpret the data? This is a big one. If they just say whatever your max heart rate was that you achieved during the test, and then do a calculation of 40 or 50 to 60% is zone 1, 60 to 70 is zone 2, 70 to 80 is zone 3, don't use that information, because you could have done that on your own just by running on the track, finding what your max heart rate is and calculating that out. If they
Okay.
do if they do the same thing but using the percentages of your VO2 max, it's maybe a little better, but I would argue it's still percentages versus looking at your actual information and saying, okay, here's where it changed, right? There's the inflection point of zone 2 is done. Here's the inflection point where we bumped into zone 4. Here's the inflection point where we're in zone 5. There are clear like physiological markers that are like way deeper than this conversation.
Yeah.
But if they're not using, like, we look at the graph and we break it down based on where those things happen, if they're just using percentages, then you can go get tested there, but send the results to me. I'll interpret them for you. How about that?
Nice. All right, that's good to know. That's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
good to know. So it really gives you that more detail versus so the difference between from what I'm hearing, the VO2 max will give you that max number that you're kind of
yeah,
redlining, and then it basically estimates, I guess, based upon percentages, probably, right? Like
yeah.
here are the zones versus you actually determining for this specific person, hey, this is when they're changing from zone 2 to zone 3. And
Right.
this is the point that they change from zone 3 to zone 4. Okay, I got it.
Right.
Awesome.
Right. And so
Okay.
this, like our heart rate, when we look at our heart rate, it climbs really slow, a slope kind of like this, right? Where the heart rate slowly climbs. A VO2 max test is meant for you to be done within 10 to 12 minutes. And so it's trying to get you to redline as fast as possible because that's where you're going to see your highest VO2 max number
Mhm.
versus getting a snapshot of the actual calories that you burn.
I see.
Does that make sense? And
Yeah, yeah.
so the slope of your heart rate line in a VO2 max test is like this versus what we do it like we're trying to get it just this slow increase so we can see like what's going on along the way. So our increments in between each stage are very small as we bump you up,
Yeah.
and theirs are like huge. They're trying to just max you out.
All right. Excellent. And then, if someone was looking to get at a testing center near them, like you had mentioned, what's the average cost of metabolic testing? Like, just so someone
Yeah.
doesn't get like, hoodwinked here.
Right. So it's really variable. So like in LA, Chicago, some of the big cities, I've seen it as much as $450. And then in, kind of everywhere else, you go to your local university, you can get it for like $75. I found that it's often not a great test there because they're just giving you the raw data and it's like, here you go, good luck, you
Right.
interpret it yourself. They don't tend to have a program with that of like trying to post process the data. They'll just give you the raw data. So
Mm.
if you don't know how to break it down, that's not usually very helpful, but it's really cheap. And so, but again, they're going to do a VO2 max test. So you really do get what you pay for. We charge 300 for the first test and 250 for follow-ups. And like
How
I said,
often do you recommend people follow up?
so I recommend at minimum an annual, but usually a biannual if you're just kind of maintaining your fitness. If you're training for something specifically, like I want to go like run a marathon. We usually do a like a 19 to 20 weeks out, 9 weeks out, and then race week tests. And so because we don't focus on the max portion of it too, we're not all out maxing during that test necessarily. Sometimes people will, and that's fine. But it's more about finding your zones. And it's a self-selected termination of the test. So when you're done, we're done.
Yeah.
I just let people push as hard as they need to, want to during that test or race week to see like, okay, I've got my zones. I'm good. That I don't need to push it to the max, right?
Yep.
Once they kind of find zone 4, that's usually good enough. So just to make sure that they're dialed in for race day of where they want to be, how to attack like a hill or different things when you have those zones dialed in. It kind of gives you some information. You can look at how many calories you should be replacing per hour and things like that for especially for longer distance things like ultra marathons and stuff. So
Right.
that's again, we could get way in the
Yeah.
weeds with how to do that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. And it seems like it does help you from what I heard is if you were in this training cycle for a marathon or an ultra, number one, you're able to adjust your training during the actual
Mhm.
training, right? To
Yeah.
adjust how your fitness is improving.
Yeah. Yep.
So you are your zone should change and you're actually adjusting in real time to make your training even more effective.
Hmm.
And then also from the fueling standpoint, I could see that being very beneficial. So
Yeah.
kind of as we get into the final stretch here, Cameron, you've shared like so much good information. This is going to be very, very informative for many runners out there. The final stretch here. It's the last question that we ask all our guests. If you can change, one thing about the misconception of running,
Yeah.
what would that be?
So, I've been pondering that. So I know that's your final question. Probably that I guess that we overcomplicate everything and that it's as simple as load versus capacity. That everything kind of boils back down to whatever our current capacity is, as long as we overload that by only just a little bit, we can grow that capacity. If we overload it too much, our capacity will drop or we get injured, and we get injured, right? So, like, basically, all training mistakes are just a load versus capacity problem. If I trip and fall running on the trail, my injuries come from loading my face too fast for what it could bear, basically, right? So if I laid down on the concrete, I'd be fine. But if my face hits the concrete, not so fine. Same thing with our training. Our running injuries and things like that just came because we loaded it up too much. It wasn't overuse. It wasn't poor mechanics. It wasn't blah, blah, blah. Like, those things can factor into it somewhat. But it really is like, even with poor mechanics, if we apply that load slowly enough, your body can adapt to just about anything. And so it's really about load versus capacity and giving our body time to build its capacity up. And so I guess that one misconception would be that pushing harder helps you more. It's more about being patient with yourself, living to play another day, and just letting your body make those changes slowly, gradually over time. And that the metabolic testing just gives us really good objective data on how to slowly allow that load capacity relationship to build so that we're not overloading and causing ourselves injuries, problems, breakdowns.
Oh my goodness, I love that explanation, especially from someone who, talks about loading like tendons a lot, and
Yeah,
my
yeah,
whole goal that we're doing with that just made so much sense in
right.
terms of our training.
Yeah.
And yeah, guys, this is gold for you. So listen to Cameron. Don't try to jump to the hottest, sexiest, crazy workout
Yeah,
that's out there, and jump too fast to hard workouts. And we get a lot of novice runners like, well, when am I going to start like doing speed work? And it's like,
right,
well, if we haven't built up the capacity yet, then
right,
I could give
right,
it to you. You're just going to get injured. So is that
right.
what you want, or do you want to
No,
actually run?
right. Yeah. Build your volume first and then work on intensity. But like, building that volume is the most important thing. Let your body adapt. And if you do that, it'll pay off huge dividends in the long run. Running, like you were saying with your client, running that 11-minute mile, as painful as that is mentally, and I get it. I'm there. It's hard, but that bears so much. It's like investing in the bank. Like, you hate to see that money come out of your bank account, but when you go to retire, you'll be so glad you did. When you get to race day and your tank isn't empty because you invested in all those slow runs, and so you have enough gas in the tank for race day, you will be so grateful that you had it.
Yeah, and guys, that is like the secret sauce
Mm-hmm.
to, being successful in running, and, not only time-wise, but health-wise, and doing it for longevity. So there's going to be many runners who resonated with your message, Cameron. And if they want to learn more about metabolic testing, or even if they get a metabolic test near them and they want you to interpret it, like, where, can our healthy runner community connect with you?
Yeah. So, our website, bodysmartutah.com, we just revamped our metabolic testing page. So there's a page in there that explains all about the metabolic testing. So I put a series of videos on how to, like, know what the results mean that you're getting and things like that. So we dive way deep into all those nerdy things that I just talked about and show you numbers and examples with different client cases and stuff. So that's a great way, bodysmartutah.com. And then just click on the on one of the tabs at the top, and it'll say metabolic testing. Then you can follow us, Body Smart PT Utah, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all those things. So Cameron Garber or Body Smart, and Body Smart Utah is the handle. So yeah, check us out on
Awesome.
all those platforms. But yeah,
It,
we love helping people in this way. It's so unique and different, but it's powerful.
Yeah, and I'll definitely throw all those in the show notes, all of those
Perfect.
links. Cameron, this has been very fun and educational. Like, I learned a ton today. This is awesome. I really need to look into this more, and I might need to follow up with a metabolic test of my own as we
Yeah,
progress along in the running journey. So thank you for your time and sharing your expertise.
my pleasure. It
And
was fun
thank
to be there.
Yeah, no, it was awesome, and like I said, so educational. And thank you to the listener, whether you're listening now during your run, or you're watching this on the Spark Healthy Runner YouTube channel. I appreciate all of you guys. If you like this episode, then you will surely like episode 135 on the Healthy Runner podcast, in which we did a deep dive into heart rate specific training. So
It was
check
so
that out.
good.
Yeah,
It
thank
was
you,
so
man.
good.
Thanks. Awesome. So, as always, runners, let's maintain a strong mind, a strong body, and just keep running. Until next time.
Thank you.